Thank you, Dr. Adile. Our next presenter is Mr. Kim Douglas. Kim Douglas is from the Caribbean island of Dominica. He majored in political science at Soochow University, and he has been in and out of Taiwan for the better part of 26 years. Over the years, he's been involved in various cultural exchange programs focused on bringing African and Caribbean cultures to Taiwanese and Chinese people. He also started the first Mandarin training program in his country, Dominica, 13 years ago for mid-school students. So I'd like to welcome
Greetings. One. All right, greetings, ladies and gentlemen. I am Kim Douglas from the beautiful Caribbean island of Dominica. Dominica, a small island located in the Lesser Antilles, a curving arc of small islands separating the Caribbean Sea and the Atlantic Ocean. It is an honor to be here today to address you at this Africa-Caribbean Day Symposium 2026. I would like to thank Danny, who invited me to share a few words and thoughts, and also Derek for helping to facilitate and hosting us here today at Academia Sinica. Today, I will attempt to encapsulate the Pan-African experience from a Caribbean perspective by standing on the shoulders of two of the most prominent Pan-Africanists that the Caribbean region has produced. The first is the late Walter Rodney, a Guyanese revolutionary scholar, historian, and political activist. The second was my dad, the late Rosie Douglas of Dominica, politician, human rights activist, and prime minister. Remember the names because I will be highlighting the contributions of these two stalwarts as I lay the foundation for my presentation. I will seek to paint a picture of the world as it was in their time and address the two forces that work in tandem to impede black progress. On the one hand is the well-documented history of slavery, exploitation, colonization, which has plagued the African man for time immemorial. On the other hand, we have the enemy within, the negative group tendencies and the actions of individuals that have perpetuated our struggles. I hope that both vices can be tackled individually as we strive to eradicate the victim mentality and rise to grasp the vast opportunities of present-day global reality. Growing up in the Caribbean, for instance, history lesson begins with Christopher Columbus discovering the Americas in 1492. We then progress to slavery, emancipation, colonization, and then independence. With that sort of colonial indoctrination, it was assumed by many that the global dominance of the West would be a permanent feature of geopolitics. Yet, we have been blessed with thinkers and visionaries who dared to stand up and realize deeper understanding of our ties as African people, and envision a future where we would work together to thwart the shackles of domination and make a meaningful contribution to the advancement of humanity. In preparation for this speech, I was forced to return to my archives. This led me back to one of Walter Rodney's most prominent works, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. The first edition of this book was published by the Tanzanian Publishing House in 1972 and became one of the most influential works in Pan-African thought. Its core argument is the notion that a formerly colonized nation has no hope of developing until it breaks effectively with the vicious cycle of dependence and exploitation which characterizes imperialism. It boldly proclaims colonialism was not a civilizing mission, but rather primarily underdevelopment, which involved exploitation and export of surplus, depriving Africa of the benefits of its natural resources and labor. The book at the time was banned in several African countries for being too radical, and yet today it stands as a relevant text in universities, from Accra, Ghana, all the way to Harvard University. After graduating from University of the West Indies, Jamaica, with a degree in history in 1963, Walter Rodney moved moved to complete his PhD in African history from the University of London in 1966 at the age of 24. He then moved on as a professor of history at the University College in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, from 1966 to 1967, and then again from 1969 to 1974. The year missing here is 1968. In that year, Rodney returned to Jamaica as a professor of history. During that time, he was very active with the youth, mobilizing and sensitizing them to the Black Power movement. This was a thorn in the side of then Jamaican Prime Minister Hugh Shearer. In comes my dad, Rosie Douglas. Rosie Douglas was one of the key organizers of the Congress of Black Writers, which was held at McGill University in Montreal, Canada, from October 11th to 14th, 1968. This forum has been hailed as a historic event in Black radical and social rights history. It is considered the largest Black Power conference ever held outside the United States and galvanized global Black consciousness. It is important to understand the heated social climate in North America at the time. Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated on April 4th of that very year. Dr. Rodney attended the Congress on invitation from Rosie Douglas, where he made an inspiring contribution. However, to Jamaica, that was the last straw. So the then Prime Minister Hugh Shearer declared Dr. Rodney persona non grata and banned him from re-entering the country on October 15, 1968. It was then that Dr. Rodney returned to Tanzania as a professor to conduct the necessary research for his book. This episode displays two Caribbean Pan-Africanists working in their respective spheres of influence, coming together to forward the mission. But I do realize that it must have also raised a few questions. Rosie Douglas, from Dominica, at McGill University, Canada, organizing and advancing the call for Black people in North America to achieve equal rights and justice? Let's first take a few steps back. Dominica has been dubbed the nature island of the Caribbean. Its mountainous topography posed many challenges to the development of agriculture. After the emancipation of slavery, and with independence on the horizon, some of the European plantation owners were looking to move on. This allowed Robert Douglas, local Dominican, father of Rosie Douglas, to purchase one of the main plantations on the island. Robert Douglas, though not born into wealth himself, was able to move to neighboring island Curacao to work in an oil refinery. He would save his fortunes and later return to Dominica to emerge as a premier land owner and businessman. So here we have Pan-Africanist Rosie Douglas, the second son of Robert and wife Bernadette Douglas. The goal was to send him to Canada to study agriculture so that he could later return home and head the family plantation. Before we continue along Rosie's path to Pan-Africanism, it is important to highlight a fun episode. At age 18, Rosie Douglas grew frustrated with the bureaucratic delays of obtaining a visa to enter Canada to pursue a degree in agriculture. He picked up the phone and called the then Canadian Prime Minister John Diefenbaker's office to assist. The Prime Minister was so impressed that he returned the call 1 month later and even sent local MP Bruce Robinson to receive Rosie at the airport. Rosie became involved in politics as a member of the Young Conservative Party of Canada. After completing his studies in agriculture, he moved to Montreal, where he enrolled in political science and economy at Sir George Williams University. It was then that he began to advance Black rights in Canada. He would leave the Conservatives when the national student leader Joe Clark refused to address the issue of racism on a national level. The poverty of Nova Scotia's Black communities in the 60s touched him so deeply that he chose to devote himself to the Black struggle. Here we pause once again to analyze. You see, the story of the life of Rosie Douglas is that of a man who, though blessed to be born into relative wealth, chose a path of struggle, service, and self-sacrifice. To drive this point home, allow me to share with you part of a letter mailed to Rosie Douglas by his father, dated January 1st, 1969. At the very time when Rosie was developing into one of the primary civil rights figures in Canada. In this letter, his father cautioned him for the path he was choosing for his life and appealed to him to cease from wasting his life on useless endeavors. Father Robert wrote, "We are glad to know that you are well But frankly, we are very much disappointed and highly dissatisfied with the present role in Canada, with your present role in Canada. And it is necessary that I make my position abundantly clear from the start. The struggle today is not much about the white man as against the eradication of the black man's low mentality, lack of ambition, which leads to a life of easygoing and complacency, wastefulness, both of his time, energy, and money. He must strive to become more financially viable and thereby cease to become a perpetual drag and drain on other people who, through their hard work, diligence, and tenacity, have been able to provide decent means of living for themselves and their family. So long as the white man continues to be studious, hardworking, ambitious, scientific, and industrious, while our people continue to spend their time and money in the gambling den and drinking and in the 101 other unproductive pursuits which the race is so fond, their offspring will forever remain poor, destitute, and downtrodden. In our misdirection, we spend too much of our valuable time looking for what we haven't got, while recklessly permitting what we have to go to rack and ruin. I cannot offer a more fitting example of that ideology than that which presents itself in our own family, and most particularly in yourself. End quote. A striking rebuke from a father who was losing his son to the struggle. But would Rosie heed the message? The Sir George Williams University affair of January 29, 1969 was the largest student occupation in Canadian history. In May 1968, 6 Caribbean students of Sir George Williams University accused biology professor Perry Anderson of discrimination due to unfair grading. But the school took a dismissive attitude towards the allegation. The anger and frustration bubbled to a climax as students grew disenchanted by an administration indifferent to their concerns. Beginning on January 29, 1969, over 400 students occupied the university's computer library. By that time, Rosie, who had already moved on to McGill University, where he was pursuing a master's degree, emerged as the leader of the protest. The occupants continued until February 11th, as the police, students bantered in the halls, fire broke out in the computer lab, forcing occupants out of the building. As students tried to escape the building, they were arrested, subjected to racial insults, and beaten savagely by police. The computer lab was destroyed, resulting in over $2 million in damage. Rosie was identified as the key agitator of the riot. On April 30th, 1971, Justice Kenneth McKay sentenced him to 2 years in prison. Before handing out the sentence, McKay stated, "Compassion, not confrontation, should be used to fight racism." Upon being sentenced, Rosie shouted defiantly, "Long live Black Power!" In response to which a voice from the courtroom shouted, "Long live fascism." Rosie served 18 months at a medium security local institution in Laval, Quebec. He delivered free education to inmates during his time at the jail and wrote reports on prison reform. The news of the Sir George Williams University riots spread throughout the Caribbean, helping to inspire a new wave of black consciousness. Numerous Black Power organizations will be informed across the Caribbean. After his brief release from prison in Canada on parole, rather than retreat from activism, Rosie embarked on a speaking tour throughout Canada and North America to raise awareness. These activities solidified the notion by Canadian authorities that Rosie was an existential threat to the national security of Canada. Yet even in the midst of all this activism, the then Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau offered Rosie the prospect of cancelling his deportation order on the condition that he publicly apologized for the destruction caused by the Sir George Williams University riot. Rosie chose to stand by his conviction, to standing up for the cause of equality, even if it would eventually lead to his deportation from Canada. In May 1976, Rosie was deported from Canada, handcuffed and in leg chains. Before he left Canada, he publicly swore that he would return to Canada as the Prime Minister of Dominica. Here again, Rosie was presented with an opportunity to walk away from the struggle and to take steps which would surely result in opportunities to secure a life for him within the system. How do we know this? Well, Anne Cools, a fellow agitator who served 4 months for her role in the school riots, accepted a similar offer from Trudeau and received a pardon for her acts of contrition. She was later appointed to the Canadian Senate, becoming the first black Canadian to be named to the Senate, where she served for over 35 years until she retired in 2017. After turning the page on the Canadian chapter, Rosie turned his attention towards liberation struggles throughout the colonized world. Rosie was the founding member of the World Mataba, established by Muammar Gaddafi in 1982, which had as its stated mission to resist imperialism, racism, fascism, Zionism, colonialism, and neo-colonialism. Rosie successfully persuaded Gaddafi to support Nelson Mandela's ANC. When Mandela was freed in 1990, he singled out Cuba and Libya for playing a critical role in the ANC's fight to defeat apartheid. At Mandela's inauguration, Rosie was given a seat at the head table, along with other dignitaries such as Fidel Castro. Dr. Walter Rodney was assassinated on June 13, 1980, by a bomb planted in a walkie-talkie device in his home country, Guyana, shortly after returning from independence ceremonies in Zimbabwe. A 2016 commission of inquiry concluded that the assassination was a state-organized act ordered by then Prime Minister Forbes Burnham and executed by Guyana Defense Force Sergeant Gregory Smith, who admitted on TV that he had planted the bomb on Burnham's orders. Here we observe that Dr. Rodney, who dedicated his life to seeking a path forward for black people and researching centuries of exploitation at the hands of Europe, met his own demise at the hands of his own compatriots who viewed him as a political threat, the enemy within. Now more than ever, it is necessary to unleash the forces of Pan-Africanism, unity of thought and purpose, as a vehicle to nurture the energy required to propel us to common prosperity. It is vital that we as African people reclaim our history and rebuild our knowledge of self as we grow and develop in this post-colonial, multipolar global landscape. To elevate ourselves from mere pawns on the geopolitical chessboard to a vibrant force with significant impact on the new emerging multipolar global order. In the midst of the ideological and geopolitical confrontations which continue to shape the 21st century, we are called upon to reaffirm our Pan-African bonds, to be conscious of who we are and where we are headed, our shared history, weaknesses, triumphs, and hardships. To reclaim our identity and rightful place among global civilization, while we remain cognizant of the common struggles against oppression. We march forward to confront history, not with hate or despair, but with responsibility and an unwavering commitment to build a brighter future. Thank you.